What's up, YouTube? Man, there's been a lot going on in boxing. We got a lot of stuff going on. I really want to talk about Tank and old Pitbull that's fighting later on this evening, but I think I'll get into that on another video. But really, what I want to get into is the old Terrance Crawford, Errol Spence debate at this point. You know, a lot of videos are going around how Terrance Crawford is saying Errol Spence has been ducking. And I think all that is a bunch of hogwash on both ends. It was a whole lot of politics involved, business, promotions, networks that was really preventing that fight. And like most people know with the state of boxing right now, it's not even about making the best fights. It's making the most money. And if we kind of understand that aspect of it, you know, our desire to have a good fight or wanting a good fight means absolutely nothing if the promoters don't believe they're going to make maximum dollar. And back in the day, you know, they keep trying to compare it to the 80s and the 70s and how boxing was just a different animal. You know, they just found a way to make the fights, and it wasn't as many network or promotional hurdles at the time. It was just a matter of just getting the guys in the ring, and kind of everybody knew what their worth was. So it wasn't a whole lot of back and forth about who was side A, who was side B. Nobody was put on a network as the side A guy to that network or to that promotion company versus another guy on a different network or a different promotional company saying he's the side A guy in that particular network or promotional company. So it's just a different era. It's even different from what the 90s were, to be honest. You know, it's actually, you know, transitioned over to a truly a how much money can we make, and is this the right time to make that fight? Because, you know, back in the day, you never heard of Sugar Ray Leonard or Tommy Hearns say, oh, I want to put on a good show. Nobody wanted to put on a good show at that time. What they wanted to do was win the fight. And if they wanted to win the fight via by knockout or by decision, that's what they were looking for. Now, what you hear from all these boxers is, I want to give the fans a good show, or I want to put on a good show. Is that the game now? I guess the game is about money and about putting on a good quote unquote show. So the show is what? What exactly is the show? We want to see you fight, and we want to see you fight, and ultimately, you know, with the, I guess the casual fan is looking for something dramatic. We're looking for a knockout. You know, I guess the people like myself, who's actually boxing fans, fanatics, so to speak. I'm looking for good technique. I'm looking for good defense. And if you're a knockout artist, and eventually I want to see you knock a guy out. If you're a technician, I want to see you put in good work and technically break down your opponent. That's what I'm looking for as a boxing fanatic. But for me to sit there and, I guess for boxers to now start using this term, putting on a show. No, what is this, Ringling Brothers? I'm not really looking for a show. I'm looking for you to do what you are getting paid to do as a professional, not to put on a show. This is not Ringling Brothers. This is not a Michael Jackson concert. This isn't this is not a show. It's a competition. I'm looking for good competition, and in that, I'm looking for you to do what you do best. If you're Floyd Mayweather, I think I want to see you technically outbox your guy. If you're Mike Tyson, I want to see you knock this guy out within 3 rounds. That's what I'm looking for. A good show. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means. It's pretty sad to see that boxing is kind of gone to this. But again, I guess I got to get back to the subject at hand, which is the Errol Spence, Terrance Crawford thing. And I'm starting to hear Bud side saying, you know, Errol Spence has been ducking since day one. Errol Spence hasn't been ducking anybody. He hadn't been ducking anybody. He's been pushing for big fights ever since Bud Crawford was at 140. He was pushing for big fights while Bud Crawford was campaigning at 140. And all of a sudden, now that Bud Crawford wants to take that step up by defeating Jeff Horn initially, who's a tomato can. You know, but nobody complained or criticized Bud Crawford for fighting Jeff Horn to get a belt. It was an easy fight to make. They were both with Top Rank. Bob Arum probably wanted the fight because he can keep all the money in house. It was an easy step up for Bud Crawford. But now all of a sudden, after he gets that belt, he wants to call out Errol Spence as somebody who's ducking him. No, he wasn't ducking him. In fact, who was he? It was no reason for him to duck. He had plenty of fights at 147 under PBC. So he was just making those easy fights to make. You know, it's very difficult this day and age to actually have cross promotion because, again, as I said, it's not about making good fights. It's about maximizing the dollar. And until we get that in our heads as boxing fans, we're always going to be disappointed. We need to understand that this is no longer we're trying to make the best fights or the biggest fights. We're not trying to make the biggest fights. We're trying to make the best paydays or the biggest paydays. Anytime you hear somebody say, I don't know if it was Leonard Ellaby or Bob Arum saying, well, we got to grow this. We got to build this fight up. You don't really have to build the fight up. You build the fighter up by giving him big, good fights, and he gets a reputation. Because at a point, and this has been working since the dawn of time, once you have a fighter that has put on, he's been defeating guys left and right, no matter what talent level they at, you just keep throwing fighters at him, and he just keeps winning. That's how you build a fighter up, so it doesn't really matter who they fight. It doesn't matter at that point. When Mike Tyson was coming up and knocking guys out in 3 rounds, it didn't matter who he was fighting. They were coming to see Mike Tyson. So for people to say, we're just trying to build this fight to make it a big fight. No, you don't have to make it. You make your fighter a big fighter. And ultimately, his fights become big fights. And they big fights because of him, not because who's in front of him. Now, ultimately, if you have 2 guys on that same track that you've built up as great fighters because they've been knocking and beating people up as they go, then yeah, that becomes one of those fights. But what they're trying to do is grow a fight. Like ultimately what we want to do is we want to maximize this dollar to make sure Errol Spence and Terrance Crawford generate $100 million. That's the goal. The goal is to put these guys in the ring because they're the best out there at this point. And whoever wins this fight, it won't matter who they fight. Because ultimately, once they start winning or they become the king of the hill, if Errol Spence beats Terrance Crawford and pretty much has all the belts, whoever he fights, he's going to demand big money. And it doesn't matter. People are going to come from all walks trying to fight him. And as he knocks them down or as he fights, he'll make money and dollars and dollars and dollars. And that's how it's done. That's how it's been done since the dawn of time. So since these guys sit there are trying to hold on to a zero or trying to build up a fight between 2 guys who really want to get it on, and ultimately you're just holding it up to try to maximize the dollar, this isn't going to work. It really isn't, because it's not going to work that way. If ultimately in the process of becoming big fighters, they become like names, household names, and doing what they do well and doing what they do best, and ultimately when they meet, it becomes a big fight and a big payday for both, fine. But when you try to manipulate the process, it kind of cheapens the fight. And any fanatic knows that the only reason this fight hadn't happened is because, for one, the networks and promotional companies could not agree, or they just didn't want the fight because the money that they would make was not going to be there for them. It's not about the fighters. It's about how much money they can generate to pay off everybody else around them. Now, until we figure how to get around that and get back to the 80s, which we'll probably never get back to because people just don't want to fight. And back then, they were probably fighting 3 times a year. Right now, what they're fighting once or twice a year at the most. So you're trying to maximize that 1 or 2 fights that they do every year. So if Errol Spence get a $10 million payday one fight and another $10 million, $20 million, that's great. We don't need to do any more. We've generated enough revenue for the year. Is that what we're doing? We're not really looking for the fights. We're just looking for the maximizing of the dollar. That's it. That's basically what it is. It's sad to see. It's sad to see. So the best isn't fighting the best because people are ducking. It's because the promotion and the network companies aren't getting the share that they desire. So they hold off until that number gets to a point where, okay, yeah, we can make this fight now because everybody's happy with that number. Until we get away from that, that's what it is. So we'll see where it goes from there. Crawford is a free agent at this point, so maybe he can sign one-shot deals and fight PBC boxers much like he did Sean Porter. If he decides to do that, it ain't about the networks fighting over this welterweight division anymore, because Bud is now a free agent. He can fight all of the welterweights from PBC because that's where the talent is. So it's no really obstacles in the way. It's just a matter of making the fight. So hopefully we're past that, and we'll see. Once Errol Spence heals up and that sort of thing, we'll see where it goes from there. But all this ducking and bickering between the two fighters and the camps, it's not about the fighters. It's about the promotion companies and the networks. And it's always been that since probably the last 10, 15 years. So at some point we have to get back to what made boxing great. And what made boxing great was when the best was fighting the best. And big fights happen organically. And right now they're trying to create these big fights for big paydays. And that's not working. And you're leaving the fan base very disappointed in the product. So anyway, like, subscribe, all of that. And we'll be back in touch. I'm sorry I've been away for a while, but the fight doctor's out. So peace, deuces.